So just sort the settings out. Okay. Start with this. Good morning and welcome to Global Futurists. Today we have a wonderful VIP. His name is Rohit Talwar. He's a global futurist, international key speaker, strategic advisor and writer, CEO of Fast Future. Let's say good morning. Good morning, Rohit.
Good morning to you both.
Morning, Rohit.
Before I continue the introduction, how's everyone doing today? Kim-Adele?
Yeah, I'm really good, thank you, Luke. How are you?
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, really, really good. And we hope you're well too, Rohit. It's great to have you on the show.
Yes, very well, thanks.
Yeah, good. So I really want to introduce you to talk about the fact that Rohit is a global futurist, award-winning and thought-provoking speaker, strategic advisor and author, entrepreneur, and the CEO of Fast Futures. He delivers keynote speeches, executive education, consultancy research, and future-focused leading mentoring to clients internationally around the world. He works with major corporations, governments, professional services, investors associations, business schools, and NGOs to help them anticipate and prepare for and create the future. He has delivered over 1,500 keynote speeches and executive workshops in 70 or more countries on 6 continents. Well, there we go. That's quite an introduction. Good morning, Rohit.
Good morning.
Okay, it's really great to have you on. I think thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, how about yourself, Kim-Adele? What would you like to?
Yeah, so really interesting. I mean, what an amazing journey you've already had, Rohit. It would be really great if you would perhaps share with us a little bit about your journey so far and some of the highs and perhaps some of the lows.
Sure. So I've always been curious, even from when I was a kid, about the future and what comes next. I think it started with the moon landings, actually, and I was always just in awe of what was done, but also fascinated by what might happen next. And gradually, after university, I kind of got into this field of consulting and started to really ask why people were doing what they were doing, realized that most people just hoped that the future would be like the past or the present. But there were a few who were looking at it in much more interesting ways and looking at what might come next. That really excited me. And so I got into that field, which was called Future Studies and Foresight. And I just loved it. And I started to get some opportunities to speak at conferences, found that the audience were often fascinated by what might come next if you could help them make sense of it. And really, we built a business on the back of that, which was a mix of speaking, consulting, research, and executive education. And then we added the publishing business a few years ago to publish books about the emerging future. And that's what we've been doing. Now, in the lockdown, it kind of wiped out all of our speaking all around the world, which was something we could see coming on a general basis. Futurists have always warned that new health emergencies will come, and we have them every couple of years, but you're never quite sure when they're going to happen. So, we had built a very successful business on the back of the speaking. And so we've had to reinvent ourselves a little bit, focusing more on online delivery, driving the publishing business harder, creating more reports that we now sell, and providing different ways of supporting our clients. So a lot of the time they don't now want speeches. They want you to just join in their executive meetings and bring some of the insights that we're gaining from all our research and from looking across sectors. And they want us to support the conversation, challenge their thinking, give them options. So we're finding very different ways of engaging at the moment. And it's a fascinating time. It's a scary time. And I think the next 3 to 6 months are going to be pivotal for pretty much everyone as we work out how we get out of lockdown and we start to work out what the next stage of the new normal might look like.
So, Rohit, did you say that you started from the moon landing? So I guess that was...
Well, I wasn't that old that I started a business then, but
no, but that's
great quickly. No, but when I watched the moon landing, and it was fascinating because as a kid we didn't really have anything. We're quite a poor family, and so watching this on a black and white TV was fascinating to me, and I was just really interested. We had a program back then called Tomorrow's World, and you'd see all this cool stuff on it, and I would just be fascinated by how might that impact our world. What would my life be like if all these crazy things that they were showing happened, and how cool would it be to be part of that, part of creating that stuff and making it happen, and being there at the start of everything. And I that was kind of what's driven me ever since, is always wanting to be involved in what's next and exploring the new and the next. And that's really what's put me in that mindset of being a futurist and trying to help others engage with the future. And we found that we could build a very profitable business on the back of that. And it's been a wild ride. It's kind of interesting now. We've made a very conscious choice that we have a team of 2 supporting us. We're going to keep them on whatever happens to revenues. We promise them they'll still be here at Christmas. And so that gives you an interesting challenge, because you stop worrying about that. You just focus on making sure you're investing in them so they're constantly creating, and you're constantly looking at where are the ideas to add value, where are the things that you can do to stand out, and what are the experiments you need to try. I think right now, no one's certain about what's next. So a bit like you created your podcast series. We created a podcast series called Aftershocks and Opportunities. We've had just under 3,000 people registered for those, and over 2,000 attend over 4 webinars. And that's been great because the content's been fantastic. The people we've had on have been really engaging, but also the level of participant engagement has been incredible. And so having done 4 as a test, that shows us that there's a demand for that kind of quality content. So now we can think about how do we price it. We can think about finding sponsors. And these are all things that we weren't doing back in January and February. This was not part of our business plan, but we've had to move there. We've also decided to create a book on what the world could look like after the pandemic. And again, that's called Aftershocks and Opportunities. We put a little call out for people to submit chapters, thinking we'd get maybe 40 or 50 at best from all our friends in the futures world. We ended up with 114 submissions. So the first book comes out on June 1st, but we've got enough brilliant quality content that we've actually been able to split it across 2 books. So the second one comes out mid-July. So these are things that, are kind of unexpected, but they're happening, and they're all part of learning to navigate the new normal, where we don't know what normal looks like yet. And I think that's going to be the case, that the individuals who come out of this best are going to be the ones who can apply a kind of entrepreneurial thinking, both to their own development, but also to the creation of new businesses or the evolution of their existing business.
It's fascinating background, and really interesting. So, I mean, the simple question is, for me to start with, would be, what is a futurist and what do futurists do?
So a lot of people get very confused when they hear the term futurist, and they think that we sit there with a crystal ball predicting what's going to happen next. And, a lot of people call themselves futurists and they stream out a whole set of predictions. Most of the time they're wrong. And they're very dangerous, because if you just focus on predictions, they can either be right or wrong. And that's not a really good way of running a business. So what future studies and what futurists are meant to be about, the ideas, the forces, the trends, the developments, and the things that are only just emerging, and helping you explore how they might all come together in different possible scenarios, so that you're prepared for 2 or 3 different possibilities. And so right now, for example, I'll give you an example. This morning, I was hearing the managing director of Vauxhall Cars talking about how predictions would be really dangerous if you used what the sales of new cars are going to look like in the first month after the lockdown. Right now, they've gone from about 186,000 cars a month, new cars being sold across the UK, to 10,000 being sold online. And he was saying that there will be a lot of people who will rush out and buy a new car as soon as lockdown's over, because they were planning to, their old lease is up or whatever. And so if you just look at that 1 month, you start to say the future's going to be fantastic. But his thing was, we need to plan for a range of different scenarios. We need to plan for one where actually the economy turns down quite deeply, as some are predicting, and that there's a second wave of redundancies as people come off furlough, but their business doesn't pick up, and so they end up being made redundant. And a lot of businesses cut back their spending because they're just uncertain about the future. The second scenario is where you have a kind of stop-start move to the economy, where some sectors really take off. I mean, Luke, you're in cleaning. My guess is that sector is going to boom, not only as businesses go back and want to give their premises a great clean to start off with, but then they start to think about what are those additional levels of cleaning we need to really protect us against, COVID-19. So cleaning could be one of those areas that really takes off. Others are going to take off as well, but some might really collapse because we've decided to deprioritize them. Maybe governments don't let us go to cinemas for a long time, and you could see a lot of cinemas closed. So, we're going to see that kind of stop-start move. And then the third one is definitely the kind of vision that Donald Trump has, which is, people are so frustrated right now. They're locked in their homes. They can't get their business moving. As soon as we come out of this, everyone's going to go at it 150 miles an hour, and we'll see this massive explosion. Now, I think as a business, you have to prepare for all 3 possibilities and have ideas that you can bring to bear depending on which scenario plays out. And for most of us, we're not big enough to shape that macro scenario, but we can respond quickly. And we can be sitting there thinking about, well, even in a downturn, what are those new opportunities that we can go after? What are the things that people will want to buy? So, personal protective equipment, my guess is that's going to be a boom market for the next couple of years. And you're already starting to see a lot of stuff that's gone beyond just something very basic that looks like hospital scrubs and hospital masks. You're starting to see designer masks, designer face cards, people putting bling on them. And so, that's going to grow. And so I think that the smart entrepreneur now is thinking about 2 or 3 different scenarios for how things could play out, what could happen to their customers and their own customers' behavior, what new markets might emerge. I'm really starting to think those through. Now, as futurists, we generally don't focus on the next 6 to 12 months that much. We tend to look much longer. I mean, before the lockdown happened, we were doing a piece for Heathrow at the end of last year that was looking at, how the world could change out to 2050, so they could think about changes in aviation and the implications for the way they do things as an airport. Now, right now, there aren't many people asking us to talk about 2050, but everyone is fascinated about the next 2 years. And the really interesting conversation is, what new behaviors might we see? What are the things that get accelerated that in the past would have seen as being a bit fringe? I'll give you one example. There's an area called human augmentation, where a lot of people have been looking at different ways of using advances in science and technology to enhance the human body. So whether that's taking drugs to enhance your cognition, and there are, type drugs like Rafil that are meant for attention deficit disorder and sleep disorder, many people have found that those enhance your cognition. Well, now there's been a spike in those, people buying them online, which I think is a bit dodgy, buying from the same places that you buy your dodgy Viagra or whatever, but people buying this stuff online, but also using electronic techniques to stimulate brain waves, physical techniques to enhance organs with genetic manipulation or exoskeletons on the outside of your body. And that, I think, is going to be one of those areas that really booms, where people realize that they have to take control of their own health and well-being, their own resilience, and start to look to science to enhance that. And there'll be a whole set of techniques and services come through. Plus, you can buy kits now on the internet to, hack your own genes. All of this stuff is going to boom. And, even 6 weeks ago, people would have been laughing at this. But now the number of players that we see developing stuff that they're going to bring to market. And I've been talking to companies in, let's say they're in consumer products, without naming them, who have suddenly gone from, wow, we wouldn't touch that, to, you know what, this could be $1 trillion sector and we would be stupid to be ignoring it. Because in the past, we've been quite conservative in our thinking. Now, the pandemic has shown us that everything is possible. We know the world's going to change. We need to be looking in the most far-flung places for the next big ideas. And I think that's the key for entrepreneurs is, everyone can be a futurist in that regard, in terms of looking where you weren't looking before for the ideas that could give you the next wave of opportunity and the next growth for your business.
Wow, fascinating stuff. And I think you're absolutely right. When we take a moment of pause, that's the chance for entrepreneurs to really get creative, isn't it? And to really think differently about what we're moving forward into, because I don't think we're going to move back. We're going to step into our future. And I think there will be, as you say, new areas of boom and of technology. But with all your experience, what are the things that you see that companies or entrepreneurs get wrong more often than they get right when it comes to thinking about their future strategy?
Well, I think that there are a couple of things. The first is we always think it's not going to happen yet. We always think it's going to take a lot longer for things to happen. And that's a mix of past experience where people have rushed up and gone, oh, I'll take this is going to be the next big thing, and it hasn't, or it's been much slower. And secondly, even when something has been the next big thing, it hasn't turned their world upside down completely. And thirdly, we all have invested a massive amount in getting to where we are today. Our experience, our knowledge, our know-how of our particular sector and the way we do things. And it's really hard to let go of that. And it's really hard to kind of open the door and let new ideas in for most of us. And we tend to kind of overemphasize the importance of our own beliefs, our own assumptions, our own thinking. And we tend to think that if we do have a new idea, we have forever to implement it. So some of those things get in the way. And even if the idea does look good and people around us are excited, we can be a little hesitant. And the challenge is learning how to be good experimenters, how to take one or two things at a time and test them. Do quick proofs of concept to see, well, how might we bring it to market? How might customers actually want to use this? What are they willing to pay for? And how much they're willing to pay? And then you can start to experiment and work out how you take that stuff to market. And I think it's the people who do really well are always working on the next one or two ideas. They're not trying to do everything. They're listening really broadly. They're out networking a lot, or now they're doing it all online. But they're listening loads. They're listening all the time. And the people who I know who are like incredibly successful entrepreneurs tend to do an awful lot more listening than they do talking. You see them at networking meetings, you study their behavior, they ask questions. They ask very open questions about what is that? How does that work? How did you make it, happen? What were the issues you faced? They're not always telling their own story. They're not always kind of wanting to be first on the dance floor in every conversation. And those people are fascinating to watch. And I think it's those people who are going to come out of this downturn far more successful, because they'll be the ones doing the most listening, the most testing, the most exploration of where the possibilities are, rather than jumping on an idea and then shouting the loudest that that is going to be the most successful one. And shouting loud is great, but now you're having to shout loud online. People can mute you. And so no matter how much you're shouting, I can just turn you off, or pretend like I'm looking at you, but I'm doing my email, so I'm not listening to you at all. B, I can just switch it off, whatever it is. So you now have to be a good listener. You have to be asking, so you're engaging the person, and therefore it's very hard for someone to switch off a conversation if they're doing the talking. And secondly, you have to show that you're responding, that you're taking on board their advice, you're asking second and third order questions, and then you're going away and acting on it to say, okay, what am I going to do? There are 5 options available to me. Options 1, 3, and 5, I'm going to park because we're not ready for those. But 2 and 4 really float my boat. Let's move on those. Let's do something. And being really clear on what is it you want to achieve with them, explaining to your staff, if you have them, what is it you're trying to do at each stage, so they're really clear. And breaking it down into really short chunks of activity. So you don't have a project of 3 months where you don't know what's going on. You're breaking it down into 5 and 10 day cycles of what is it we want to learn in each 5 or 10 day cycle. How big's the market? What's going on elsewhere? Who's learning what? And then you learn these bits, and then you decide, well, what could we do? And very quickly you build up a picture of what is it you might want to bring to market. How might you do it? How do you create your unique version of it? And how quickly can you get it into the marketplace to test it? And so those aren't futurist thinking. Those are just good business thinking. But we're finding that often the people who do the best future thinking in the entrepreneurial community are also the ones who create the best businesses, because they're constantly looking over the horizon.
Wow, yeah. Fascinating stuff. And I guess that curiosity that you've clearly demonstrated as part of your makeup and your passion for finding new things and thinking it out. And is it almost like agile learning, isn't it? That kind of thinking in small bursts to really dig into your problem. Would that be a fair reflection? Yeah,
and what we found is that whether it's preparing for the long-term future or dealing with the near term, whether that be the next few weeks or the next few months, that getting people to do little chunks of learning in tiny bite-sized pieces is way more effective than sitting them down and making them listen for 6 hours or 2 days. Having conversations with people that last 5 or 10 minutes, watching a series of 2 and 3 minute videos about a new idea or a new concept, reading tiny bits is really powerful. So when we started doing, as an example, when we started doing our webinar series, we worked with a partner and they said they had all the technical ability to do everything we needed to do with the platform we were using. And they turned out to be less than good. And actually, a lot of the stuff we wanted to do, they said we couldn't do. And in the end, after 2, we agreed to part company. We then took over. And I would say that over the course of 2 hours learning, I learned to do more than everything they'd done for us. But I also learned how to do some really cool stuff with the platform. And that was by watching tiny videos that went from about 90 seconds to the longest being 10 minutes and reading little pieces of how to do X and how to do Y. And the company who provided that platform had really got it in terms of how the reader or the viewer wanted to consume the information. So I could literally go from one call with someone online, having 15 minutes between calls. I could consume 2 videos to learn the next couple of functions, then have my next call, or we'd be planning something as a team. We'd do a dry run. We'd say, oh, we don't know how to do X. Go off and look at that, 5 minutes, fix it, learn how to do it, set it up. And then the next time we did a dry run, it was there. So I think that really boosted our confidence that we could do this, that we could create a good experience with relatively limited amount of investment. But our own learning shot up. And I think we're seeing that all over the place, that the companies who are encouraging their staffs to learn now, to raise their digital literacy, to learn how to use these platforms, to explore new tools, are really moving forward quickly. One of the things that I've seen that I think is really incredible is companies are learning how to make decisions far better now. In the past, you'd get everyone in a room, you'd sit people around the table, the loudest voice would tend to dominate the conversation. And largely, whoever had the idea or whoever was in charge got their idea through. People would then leave the room and around the coffee machine would say, well, that was a waste of time, or, well, let's see how it goes, and weren't really committed. Now you're seeing these collective intelligence tools coming through where people can get on, you've got 5 different sets of opinions, everyone can share, you can learn about each other's perspectives. And gradually you start to understand that you're not that far apart. You find the real points of difference. You work on those. You might still go for a majority decision, but at least you understand much more about the concerns that might have driven someone to object in the past. And so you end up with a better solution. And funnily enough, you end up with it happening faster because these tools work in a different way. And I think they're so cool. And I'm not going to name any now because I'm not in the business of promoting any one brand, but Nesta is an independent foundation founded by the government that looks at this stuff. So if you're interested in that stuff, go and have a look at Nesta's work on collective intelligence, and you'll see, again, tiny bits of information, videos of the different tools. And I think those are going to change the way people behave inside organizations, whether you're big or small, and actually let you make better decisions faster and create much greater engagement with the team to feel like their voice has been heard.
Rohit, on that point about how, what to expect, see things playing out in the next 2 to 5 years, many people, I would say, make the mistake of saying, can't wait until things get back to normal. They say lockdown will go down and things get back to normal. My thought to them every time is, we are not going to get back to normal. We have to plan now, we have to pivot and prepare for the future and adapt. And like you were saying, many people, entrepreneurs and so forth have been spending this time of lockdown not as a time of recuperation or a time of relaxation, but actually a time of really stepping up. I know personally I've worked harder than a long time, many hours every day and weekends and so on, trying to obviously reconnect and get at the best place possible for the future as we come out of this.
And you've got that nuclear reactor chamber behind you, so isn't it? Your spare time.
Yeah, exactly. So we create our own atoms now. Yeah.
Or is it your wormhole? I'm not sure.
So it's So some things will return back. But what things do you think will not change? Will not return back, and that they're here for good?
Well, I think that we're going to see a lot of new things emerge that we are just starting to see. So online entertainment, I think the lockdown has opened people up to things that they would never have done before. Going to virtual parties, taking part in massive pub quizzes online, watching videos for entertainment, of people speaking, doing yoga online, doing spiritual retreats online. There's an incredible explosion. That's not going to go away because people can now do more from home. They don't have to worry about traveling to somewhere. The prices are lower. So there is an explosion of that stuff. Some of it will die, but some of it will live on. Secondly, our needs and expectations have changed. Yes, people are going to rush out and there'll be a little flurry of buying stuff just for the sake of being able to walk around a clothing shop or a furniture store or a car showroom and all that. But then there'll also be a bit kick in where I think the next few years are going to be uncertain economically. We don't know what it's going to look like. So I think a lot of people will be a little bit more cautious in their spending, and that'll play through. We also know that right now a lot of people are furloughed. Their companies have kept them on the books because the government is paying 80% of the wages in the UK and different deals around the rest of the world. When things start back up, a lot of those businesses just don't know how demand will look for their offering and whether people will want to go to their businesses. And so if the government doesn't keep the furlough scheme going, my guess is there will be a second wave of business closures and redundancies and those kinds of things. So there'll be another little shock. But downturns are also a great opportunity. So when some businesses close, other people are going to say, well, there is an opportunity in that space, but it's a different one. So we might not be allowed to go to pubs for some time. But you're seeing now some of the brewers create this idea of a pub in a box, you know, where you can buy a range of different beers, some crisps, some nuts, a pub game, some music to play. And so they're giving you the whole experience. Now, I guess that what's going to happen is we'll see more of that. That we won't be allowed to go to the pub, but we'll be allowed to gather with 10 of our friends at home. So we'll start to buy these ready-made experiences that we can bring in. And I think there'll be a lot of that kind of thing happen, where old ventures, old types of businesses close, but new experiences emerge. So, you know, cinemas aren't allowed to open again, or it's economically inviolable for them to keep 3 seats empty between each paying customer. What you might see is the cinemas turn into experience creators, where you can rent the film from them, again, with the popcorn, the crisps and other stuff, and the ability to chat to each other afterwards, but also they bring in a celebrity. So I was on a group a couple of weeks ago where we were going to watch a film, and before we watched the film, we had a chat with Gemma Arterton, and she just chatted to us for 20 minutes from her front room. And it was lovely. You know, you had a chance to ask her some questions. She chatted, but it was a bit of an experience. So I think you'll see people reinvent old experiences in new ways. And you won't necessarily have to be a cinema chain to do that. Anyone could go in and go, well, actually, now I don't have the fixed overheads of having to set up a cinema and all of that. I can do this from my bedroom. I can rent the film and I can then make it available online, and I can package everything else up. And so you'll see people with an entrepreneurial mindset going, a lot of players are disappearing in a particular market. The ultimate need of entertainment or whatever is still there, but I'm going to deliver it in a very different way. And I think that's where you'll see a lot of innovation. And then, as I say, things like, you know, protective clothing, cleaning of the workplace, everything to do with improving people's sense of resilience, people's sense of well-being, people's sense of safety are going to be massive. And then finding some ways of creating new indulgences for people, because we're not used to just living a hair shirt life and not having stuff. We've got used to that. So those kind of new opportunities as well, new ways of entertaining ourselves at home or in small groups, I think we'll see more and more of that. And with the old industries, this could well be a point of no return for some. The car industry is, a lot of people have learned to live without their cars in this period. My guess is a lot of people who lost their jobs will be selling their cars. The second-hand market is going to explode. There'll be a lot of nearly new cars out there. And why would I pay 15 grand or 20 grand for a new car when I can buy, something with 5,000 miles on the clock for half that price? I think you're going to see a lot of that. And so, for some industries, there's going to be big questions about how they come back. I wouldn't want to be an aircraft maker right now, with the number of airlines that are in trouble. And we don't know how the airlines are going to come back because we don't know what government rules will be. And we know some countries like Argentina have said there will be no flights in or out of Argentina until the 1st of September. That could kill a lot of airlines. And so, what comes in its place? Will new airlines emerge? And funnily enough, I've had a message this morning, and after this call, I'm online with someone who wants to buy an airline. And because we do a lot of stuff in that space, wants my advice about how he buys and turns around this failing airline, but much more as a technology play than as a company running big bits of metal. And so, you're going to see new players coming into spaces who see how they can reinvent things. And I think all of that's really interesting, really exciting. I'm glad I'm in the job I do because people always want that sense of what's next and what's possible. But, I wouldn't want to be training people how to be door-to-door salespeople at the moment.
No, that would be a particularly awkward one to do, wouldn't it? But I think it's fascinating how people have got very creative. I went on a virtual pub quiz myself last week with I think 172,000 other people, which was kind of immense, and managed to virtually catch up therefore with friends. But I think that's because we are all social animals, aren't we? And that's one of the things that we're missing perhaps in lockdown, and people have found creative ways of getting there. And I think it is taking that creativity into your future, isn't it? Having people like you to help people see where there might be those opportunities, those corners that they could look in, to think differently and expand their thinking. So you've already shared so much with us, which has been amazing. But could I ask you, if you had to go back and give yourself a bit of advice, your younger self, what would you go back and tell yourself that you wish you'd known then?
I think the big one is act faster. I'm quite an analytical person. I'm quite gather a bit more data type person, which is fine. And then a lot of people are like that. But I think that willingness to test ideas quicker, to bring things to market quicker, see what the market says, because like Mike Tyson says, having a plan is brilliant until you get the first punch in the face. And it's only when the market either kisses you or punches you that you kind of know whether you've got a good idea. And no amount of planning and no amount of PowerPoint presentations and refining your website to the nth degree, none of that matters until it makes contact with the world. And so I think that would be my thing, is act faster, try stuff, don't be afraid to fail, ask more questions. Like, I think for a long time, I used to think I was quite clever, and I kind of was driven by this thing of I'm the smartest person in the room. All futurists have this. It's a genetic thing. But it was only when I kind of realized that didn't matter, and no one else liked the fact that you thought you were the smartest person in the room. And actually, the smartest person in the room generally is the one who said least, asked most questions, and was most flexible. That my world changed. And I think if I'd learned that earlier, that would have been great. And then there's an awful lot of stuff in my personal life, I think, about learning about various things to develop my, spiritually, being much more exploratory in those techniques to kind of enhance my own capabilities. I should have embraced that a lot earlier. I think that would have been great. And learning about girls as a father, that would have been the other one. Like, they shouldn't let you out of the hospital till you've done 2-hour training course on what girls are like, and then make you retake it every month. Bits of content, because I grew up in a house with 3 sisters, just me and a mother, and so I thought I'd had some training, but boy did I miss that. And learning how to be a father to girls, I think was one that I could have learned a lot faster.
Wow, yeah, it is definitely fascinating. In a minute, I'm going to ask you the same question that we asked someone else about: which 3 films would you think of would best represent came true, if you like, or come true? But last week we had David Wood, futurist, who I think you know well, don't you?
Yeah.
Of course, he's the chair of the London Futurist, and so I asked David which 3 films best that have come out best represent the future. Which would be worth watching, which best sort of encapsulate actually what's going to happen or is happening.
Right, so you want my 3. I think there's one called Ex Machina, which is a really good one about what happens when we develop machines with human-like intelligence or smarter than human intelligence, and how they behave, or how they could behave. It's a great film, and it's really well played out. Along similar lines, there's a film called Her, where the operating system on our devices gradually gets smarter and smarter. And there's one bit in that where he's fallen in love with the operating system, and she's pretending to be. They've given her a personality. In this case, they've made it a her, and it's in love with him in some sense. But he says, when you said you were in love with me, were you in love with anyone else at the same time that you were looking after? And she says yes. And he says, well, how many? And she says 625. And it's that idea, getting our heads around that idea that this exponential curve that we now got used to is going to make technology something like 1 million times more powerful in the coming decade or so. What that will do will be completely mind-blowing. But that film really got across that idea. And in the end, she leaves him because she's fallen in love with another AI, which is way smarter. And this mere human just can't keep up. And it's that sense of, where it could go with AI to understand it. And then what's the third one that I really like? Interstellar. And Interstellar I love because every time you watch it,
that's a good film.
It's a different experience. You understand a tiny bit more about it, but you realize how much more you don't understand. And I think there's a level of that to the future, that the science and technology that's coming is mind-blowing. What it will make possible is mind-blowing. The idea that you and I could upload our thoughts, that you'll be able to tap into someone else's thoughts and rent them, or commercialize ideas that Kim-Adele might have had. And then will Kim-Adele earn revenue from an idea that I've commercialized that she's released? That maybe we'll be able to share our dreams or invite people into our dreams. And all of that stuff, that once we start to capture what goes on in the mind, and once we start to play with consciousness in a digital form, our imaginations aren't big enough to explore what might happen. And when AI starts to get smarter than humans and creates this, we're into a kind of world of imagination and possibility that I think is way beyond anything that we could even begin to articulate today. It's very hard to describe what a super intelligent artificial intelligence might be like using basic human intelligence. But you kind of know it will solve problems that we can't even begin to get our heads around today. Like, how would you deal with the next pandemic so that it didn't happen on a global basis? Because although it's airborne, it's also aircraft-borne, that it travels on planes. So how do you deal with that? With, wherever it starts, it could go anywhere. And I think we're going to need AI to solve that, and also AI to do the modeling and come up with the analysis of the models, because what we're seeing now is kind of model regret in a lot of countries where they created models for how the pandemic might work. They based all their strategy on it, and it's now turned out to be flawed. And there's also been a lot of not invented here.
Yes.
So people who seem to crack this quickest were Hong Kong, Taiwan, Singapore, and Korea. How many deaths has Hong Kong had? 4. Taiwan, 6. How close are they to China? But they had the best epidemiology, and it's very practical things. So I've had a friend of mine who's been close to death with this for 2 months now, and he keeps coming back, and he's having to tell the medics the research they should be looking at, because he's a very smart guy. But they, for the first month, were trying to treat him as though this was purely a respiratory illness. So we had all that stuff about respirators. And he was saying, no, this has spread to my legs. There's problems with my heart. I can feel this in different parts of my body. And for the first month, they wouldn't listen. And then he, in the end, started showing them scientific research from China about the actual disease, from Taiwan and from, I think it was Korea, that showed that they had found back in March that this spread in a different way and had different impacts. And it was only in the last couple of weeks that they started to take that seriously and treat him for that his condition has started to improve. Luckily, he managed to survive for a long time with them treating him wrongly. And this wasn't bad intent on their part. This was just more a sense of we know best, rather than looking more broadly. And I think AI would be taking the best advice from wherever it comes from, would be drawing on the best intelligence, and would be guiding us in very different ways. Obviously, there are massive moral and social and ethical issues around how much we want to trust AI, how much do we want it to have our data, how much do we want it to be doing all the work of society, because what will the rest of us do? We're not trained, as we've discovered in the last couple of months, we're not trained to have a lot of free time. Not everyone uses it well. So we're going to have to learn to use our time differently, learn new skills, and learn to do the things that we have more passion for, which is the area where I think we'll still want humans to be involved rather than AI. Like, I think it's fun watching a robot drummer for about 2 minutes. I think it's fun watching a robot cook food for about 3 minutes. But I want humans doing that. I want humans bringing love and passion. I love the fact that if I go and watch La Traviata 3 nights in a row, or I go and watch a band play 3 nights in a row, they're going to be slightly different.
Yep.
For the same songs, there's going to be slight differences, and that's being human. And that, so, the areas where we're going to put more importance on are the ones where passion, human creativity, human ingenuity are most important. And some of the jobs that we used to think were most important for humans to do, we'll start to acknowledge that the technology can probably do them better and more efficiently, and actually will liberate people, but we'll have to train them more to use that liberation and to invest in themselves more for the world we're moving into.
Fascinating. Thank you so much, Rohit. It's I think perhaps we need to get you back on. There's so much more to talk about, isn't there? But you cover some really interesting things. I know that obviously the listeners will be find it so interesting, and no doubt people will be sharing it with many people they know on social media and things. Kim-Adele, I'm sure you found it very interesting too. Would you like to just summarize some of the things that we heard, some of the best parts that we can take?
Yeah, absolutely. And wow, Rohit, I've talked to you all day. It's fascinating stuff. But I think for me, kind of a lot of the things that you kind of talked through had a similar theme, which was around remaining curious and keeping your mind open, asking lots of questions, and really listening to understand rather than listening to interject, being some of the top tips to enable you to be ready to spot the opportunity and then step into it. And I think also that need to keep our minds open about where we might need to pivot what we're doing today to be slightly different for the future. And I loved the bit where you were talking about our ability to perhaps share our dreams and be able to work together on ideas and kind of help each other forward. And I think also the fact that AI is going to play such a huge part in our world moving forward, but actually our emotional intelligence is going to be even more required for us to be able to thrive as human beings and remain connected.
Well said. Yeah, amazing. Well, thank you so much, Rohit, and obviously I wish you all the best in your endeavors as you continue to reshape, adapt to where we are, as I'm sure each person. I mean, there's a final thing maybe you'd like to say to people listening, to especially to business owners and things. Just
I think that now is the time to listen more than you've ever listened, to believe in your ability to find the right next thing, and be really willing to do rapid experimentation with new ideas, to create something, to test it in the marketplace, to let it go if it doesn't seem to be working and move on to the next. I think now more than ever, people are willing to be forgiving of companies trying stuff and being honest that they're trying a new service and it may or may not work. They're testing the market because everyone's in the same boat. Everyone's having their revenues decimated, other than the people who are seeing, crazy explosions in revenue. But so everyone is in that space of experimentation and trying to find new ideas, new business models, new propositions for how you communicate what you have. And the key thing is to make sure within that whatever you deliver, you feel proud of, that you've created something of real value, that you've put a lot of careful effort in the design, but don't wait too long. Don't try and make it perfect. You never will. Let the marketplace finish it off for you. Let the marketplace tell you the refinements to make, and find clever ways in your pricing to reward people for giving you good feedback that helps you refine the proposition.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much, Rohit. Thanks for your time. And yeah, it's been absolutely brilliant, don't you think, Kim-Adele? And yeah.
Absolutely, it's been an absolute pleasure. And as I say, I could quite happily chat to you all day, and we'll have to have a chat all day about parenting girls, because I've got a little girl of my own, so they don't come with a manual, do they? But it has been an absolute joy, and I look forward to next time.
Me too.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, and I've now got to go and talk to someone about how to buy an airline.
Good luck with that.
Bye. Yeah.
Bye now.
Thank you so much. Welcome to Global Futurists. We look forward to seeing you again. Please go to the website and look us up, share, cmx.co.uk/global-futurists. Look us up, and we look forward to seeing you there. Take care, guys. Thanks.